March 1945. Western Germany. World War II was nearing its end. But war was still killing with ruthless efficiency. Entire families disappear between sunrise and sunset. Villages burn. Refugees crowded the roads. Artillery shells fell without warning. And beneath the ruins of a shattered bakery, a terrified 9-year-old German boy was waiting to die. He had been taught to fear Americans his entire life. Instead, one American medic carried him across a battlefield. 51 years later, a letter arrived. What it contained would leave the old soldier in tears. This is a true story. Staff Sergeant Tom Callahan was 26 years old and came from Ohio. He served as a combat medic in the United States Army. In theory, his job was simple: keep soldiers alive. Reality was something else entirely. It meant crawling through machine gun fire, dragging wounded men from exploding fields, and making impossible decisions in seconds: who could still be saved, and who could not. By the spring of 1945, Tom had witnessed more death than he believed any human being should ever see. Friends, enemies, civilians, children. War spared no one. Then one morning, while searching a ruined German village, Tom heard something beneath the silence: a faint knocking. The village had been shelled throughout the night. When American troops entered at dawn, they expected resistance. Instead, they found devastation: collapsed homes, destroyed wagons, dead livestock, silence. Tom followed the faint sound toward what had once been a bakery. Beneath the rubble, he discovered a partially buried cellar door. Inside, surrounded by dust and broken bricks, lay a German woman and her son. The woman had been dead for hours. A collapsed wall had crushed her during the bombardment. Even in death, one arm still wrapped protectively around her child. The boy looked about 9 years old, weak, terrified. His leg had been badly crushed by falling masonry. The wound was already infected. The moment he saw Tom's American uniform, he pressed himself into the corner. For years, Nazi propaganda had taught him exactly who Americans were supposed to be: cruel, merciless. In the boy's eyes, Tom was not a rescuer. He was the enemy. Tom slowly knelt down. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and offered the boy a chocolate bar. The child stared. Tom smiled. After several long seconds, the boy cautiously accepted it. It was the first conversation they ever had. The nearest surgical station was more than 30 miles away. No vehicles could reach the village. The roads had been destroyed. Artillery still echoed across the countryside. The boy would never survive the journey on foot. Unless someone carried him. Tom never hesitated. He cleaned the wound, wrapped the injured leg, lifted the child onto his back, and started walking. Eventually, the boy whispered his name: Tarl Fisher. Tarl spoke almost no English. Tom spoke almost no German. Yet somehow, they understood one another. Water, food, rest, safe, okay. For 2 days, Tom carried Carl across war-torn Germany, through rain, through mud, across fields littered with shell casings and shattered vehicles. Twice, incoming artillery forced Tom to throw himself over the boy, shielding Carl with his own body. At night, they slept beneath abandoned wagons and inside ruined barns. Carl often woke screaming from nightmare. Every single time, Tom stayed beside him until he fell asleep again. The boy had lost his mother, his home, nearly everything, but he had not lost his life. Tom intended to keep it that way. On the third morning, they finally reached an American field hospital. Doctors rushed Carl into surgery immediately. The infection had spread dangerously. One more day, they said, and the boy likely would have died. Tom waited outside. Hours passed. Finally, a surgeon emerged. The boy's going to be all right. For the first time in days, Tom allowed himself to breathe. The surgeon smiled. You look worse than the patient. Before returning to his unit, Tom visited Carl one final time. The boy was awake, weak, but smiling. Tom removed his unit patch from his uniform and placed it into Carl's hand. A souvenir, he said softly. Then he walked away. War continued, as war always does. Germany surrendered weeks later. Tom returned home to Ohio. He married his sweetheart, raised 4 children, opened a small grocery store, built a good life. Yet every spring, his thoughts returned to the same question. What happened to Carl? Did he survive? Did he remember? Or had war erased those memories forever? Tom had no way of knowing. War scatters lives across continents. Some stories simply end unfinished, or so he believed. In 1996, 51 years after the war, a letter arrived at Tom's home. The envelope was postmarked Germany. Inside was a photograph. A gray-haired man stood inside a hospital. Pinned to his white coat was a faded American Army unit patch. Tom stared. He read the signature once. Then again, his hands began to tremble. Tears filled his eyes. The letter was signed, Carl Fisher. The boy had survived. More than that, Carl had become a surgeon. For over 30 years, he had dedicated his life to treating injured children throughout Germany. The letter explained that Carl had spent decades searching for the American medic who had saved him. That small patch had eventually led him through military archives, and finally, to Ohio. At the bottom of the letter was one final sentence: "Because you saved one frightened boy, countless children are alive today. Every child I have healed carries a part of your kindness." The following year, Carl flew to the United States. Tom was 78. Carl was 61. When they finally met at the airport, neither man spoke. After 51 years, there were simply no words large enough. They stood silently, looking at one another, an old medic, and the boy he had once carried through a war. Then Carl stepped forward and embraced him. Witnesses later said both men wept. Neither let go for several minutes. Carl handed Tom a framed photograph. It showed dozens of children gathered outside a German hospital. Written on the back were these words: "You saved a frightened child." He spent the rest of his life trying to honor that gift. Tom kept that photograph beside his chair for the rest of his life. When Thomas Callahan passed away in 2008, flowers arrived from across the United States. One arrangement came from Germany. Attached was a note from Carl. It read, "In 1945, an American soldier carried an enemy child across a battlefield because he believed one life was worth saving. Everything I became began with that decision. One soldier saved one frightened boy. That boy grew up to save thousands more." Compassion had multiplied across generations. History often remembers war through battles, victories, and generals. But sometimes, the greatest victory has nothing to do with defeating an enemy. Sometimes, it begins with a single act of kindness, and that kindness echoes through time. If you enjoy forgotten stories from World War II, please subscribe and join us as we remember the moments history should never forget.